Hi guys, welcome back to another part of Java tutorial. In today's episode, we will discuss something more about exception handling mechanisms available in Java. In this episode, I explain what happens if there is more than one catch block, if there is more than one exception occur in a single try block, and how to organize more than one catch block with a single try block. So for demonstrating all these concepts, I create a program here with the class name exception demo. In the main method there are two variables a and b which are of integer type, and there is other variable result which is of float type, and I just get the value for a and b from the command line argument of index 0 and 1 and find out the result as a divided by b. Of course, this is a statement that will generate some exception if user enter some invalid input for the value of for the variable b. That means if user enters 0 for variable b, that will definitely create an exception. So I here just run this program. I just provide two values 6 and 3 for a and b and run it again. Run it now. Now we got the result. Now it's working fine. There is no exceptions is generated. So I run it again. In this case, I am going to give value 0 for the variable b. In this case, definitely it will cause an exception. Now you can see an exception is generated here. But this exception message is actually created by the JVM itself. Now we can code this exception, that generated exception within the program itself using the first exception handling mechanisms available in Java called using the try catch block. So these two statements are the exception generated that cause the exception to occur. So here I am going to insert these two statements within a try block, and here I just create a catch block. So if you do not know what is the actual exception is, you can use the common exception class called exception. So here I just create an object of the common exception class called exception, and here I just print out that value, print out something about that exception. And exception is caught. Okay, I just got that exception within the program itself using a try catch block, and print a print a message on the catch block. An exception is just caught, and I save it. Now I'm going to run it again. So in this case, the second variable is 0. That means the value for the b is now 0, which will cause an exception called arithmetic exception, and I click OK. Now we successfully caught that exception within the program itself, and this is the message. Here is the message. So here the actual exception is generated is a division by 0. That means the value of b is 0. So if you know what is the actual exception is, you can use the correct exception as. So here I'm going to create another catch with this single try. I give it as arithmetic exception. Here arithmetic exception is the correct exception actually generated here. Here I just create that exception called arithmetic exception and print out it. Arithmetic exception division by 0 found. Okay, Now I save it. So in this case you can see here there is only one try block and there are two catch block associated with that try block, but here is a problem occur. So here you can see here I use a common exception class here, and as as in the second catch block I use a subclass of this exception. Actually arithmetic exception class is a subclass of exception class. In this case it will cause an error, so I just run it, compile it. Now it will cause an error, exception demo error. Exception arithmetic exception has already been caught. That means which exception, whatever it is actually quoted on the common exception class and it is not going down. That means this is a code which is actually not in range. So if you're using a common exception class, if you're using a common exception class in a catch block of a try, then make sure that that must be the last that must be the last catch block corresponding to that try block. So I just move it down. Now it is fine. I save it again. Now I'm going to compile it again. Now it is working fine. So that is the rule. If you're using a common exception class as it's a common exception class in a catch block, then that must be the that must be within the last catch block available with the try block. Now here there are two catch block are available, and that common exception class is embedded at the last catch block. So now here I am going to create another exception. Here there is two values are created, two values are accepted. So I just delete the try here from here and place it here. Okay, now I make the try. Just I put these statements also in the try block. Now I create one more exception here. So if I does not provide, if I am not providing any value for these any of these arguments, that means if there is no value for the second index of that array, then that must be generate another exception called array index out of bound exception. So I run the program again. So I'm not providing any value for the second index of that command line argument, and in this case it definitely caught an exception. So here an exception is caught. So here what happens is whenever the value for b is actually there is no value within this array and at index 1, so whenever this statement execute it will generate an exception called array index out of bound exception. So the compiler will check it for the first exception, arithmetic exception. It is not an arithmetic exception, it is actually array index out of bound exception. So there is no catch block that corresponding to that array index out of bound exception, so it will handle by the common exception class called exception. So that's why this statement is actually executed there. Okay, so now here I'm going to place that statement also, catch array index out of bounds exception. I just create that exception also, array index out of bound exception. I handle it within this class catch block. So here print a message system dot out dot println, and array index out of bounds exception is caught. Okay, now I save it again. Now I'm going to run it without a second argument. So now it is actually coded on the array index out of bound exception. Array index out of bound exception is caught. Guys, this is how we using multiple catch for a single try block. Actually, there is only one try block is, and there are two statements that cause some exceptions. Here, the statement b is equal to integer dot parseInt. If we not provide a second argument, that then this statement will create an exception called array index outer bound exception. And the second statement that may cause an exception is result is equal to a divided by b. If the value of b is 0, then this will cause an array arithmetic exception. So here I create the arithmetic exception here. If this statement generate any exception, then this catch block will execute. Otherwise, this catch block will execute. If there is any other exception other than these two happens occur, then that will handle on this exception, general class exception. And the common rule here is, here is, if you're using a common class exception in a catch block, then that catch must be the last catch within available with the try block. Please subscribe my channel now for getting more video updates. Thank you for watching. See you in the next part of this tutorial.